Recognize myself for 5 minutes. In March, Mr. Aronson, you held separate closed-door meetings with the Colombian government and the FARC negotiators in Havana. This was the first meeting between the U.S. and FARC since 1998. What role does the FARC say the U.S. should play in the region going forward? What is their thought process about the U.S. involvement?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. I think they were frankly curious about what role we would play in two dimensions. One, are we supportive of the peace process, and will we be supportive of the settlement? And they have some legitimate concerns in that area, particularly about their own security, given the history of the Union Patriotica in 1985. And I was able to tell them that, in fact, if they disarm, demobilize, reintegrate, get out of criminal activity, meet their responsibilities under justice. The United States is not hostile to an agreement that includes rural development and land for campesinos and roads and bridges to allow peasants to get their crops out of the country. So I think, that's an important message. It's a similar message, frankly, that I delivered to the FMLN a long time ago when we were trying to negotiate an end to the Salvadoran War.
They're pretty clear on the U.S. position that they need to lay down the arms and stop the violence and be held accountable to the rule of law.
I don't think they have any illusions about that, but I would say that's the Colombian government's position, and we completely agree with that and support it. But I'm always careful to make it clear that we don't have a separate position from the Colombians, but I don't think they have any illusions about those issues.
So is your role more of just one of observation if you're not carrying a message from the American government about what peace looks like?
Well, I do carry such a message, but it's in support of the Colombian government's agenda. I certainly make it clear that we support both the implementation of an agreement in areas that we've been supporting for many years, such as I mentioned, rural development, but also that we support the government's demand that they disarm and demobilize and reintegrate, that they give up criminal activity. They have no illusions that that's what the United States believes.
Right. Okay. If the FARC refuses to lay down their arms, demobilize, or face jail time or some sort of reparations for the crimes that they've committed, what hope is there for justice and a peace accord?
What hope is there for justice in a peace accord?
What hope is there for justice in a peace accord? If they're refusing to meet some of the requirements that Santos has put forward, and I believe the free world stands with that, lay down your arms, demobilize, and pay reparations for your crimes, whether that's jail time or whatnot. What hope is there?
Well, I think if they don't lay down their arms in a reasonable timetable, there's no hope for a peace agreement. No government of Colombia is going to make a peace agreement in which they remain in armed force for some extended period of time. So I think disarmament is key. Justice for victims and the transitional justice that you mentioned is also a significant element of the end game. But if they're not willing to embrace disarmament, then you're not talking peace. You're talking some armed truce. I don't think the Colombian government is going to accept that.
Right. Let me shift to Mr. Lee. I traveled down with Chairman Royce back in November, and we visited with President Santos in Bogota. But before we got to Colombia, kind of reversing our trip back, we spent some time in Peru, and we saw the manual eradication process of coca fields in the mountains. And when Chairman Engel gets here, he was there. We actually participated to see the significant effort, really, to eradicate those crops manually. And so I'm not going to question the Colombian people's decision, because I believe it was the Colombian people's decision not to do aerial spraying. But I do think that not allowing aerial spraying will have a detrimental effect on the progress made to eradicate the cocoa crops, because I believe that the manual process is time-consuming, labor-intensive, and it's going to be tough in the mountains of Colombia. So what are your thoughts on that? If we don't eradicate the cocoa crop, then we don't cut off the funding source for the FARC. How is that going to affect their ability to operate? And so you can talk broadly about the eradication aerial spraying issue, but kind of shift it more toward funding for FARC, if you don't mind.
We respect the decision and the sovereign decision of the Colombian government to terminate aerial eradication. We may regret it, but that is a decision that we respect that the Colombian government has made. But we are in the process of thinking through with the Colombian government on ways that we can both work together to take advantage of the various tools that we have and augment them to address the counter-narcotics challenge, because both countries remain firmly committed to combating narcotics cultivation, production, and trafficking. And some of the things that we're talking about we have been already doing, such as manual eradication or interdiction, but there also are, and in addition to developing and prosecuting cases against major traffickers, but there are also additional tools that we're in discussion with the Colombian government in order to reach a package that we can put forward to our respective leaders to deal with this challenge. It is our goal to cut the recipients of narcotics trafficking to all illicit actors, including the FARC, including those that have no pretense of ideological affiliation, and we see a Colombian government equally determined in that shared goal.
You know how difficult it is to manually eradicate a cocoa tree. You can't just machete these things. You need to pull them up by the roots.
We're aware of the particular challenges of manual eradication. It puts the eradicators in a certain danger. Right. It is labor and time intensive. It requires security packages. But as I said, I think there are a variety of other tools that we can use in combination.
Right. So I agree with you. Let me ask you this in the essence of time. Are you aware of USAID's or anything that they're doing in Colombia for alternative crop production, training these farmers? A lot of them are peasants hired by the FARC to go out and plant these areas, slash and burn of the jungle, come back and replant, and then harvest the coca leaves. So are you aware, and what we saw in Peru is a USAID program, which I think is very effective, an alternative crop training. Are you aware of anything going on in Colombia like that?
That is one of the areas that we're talking with the Colombian government. We have done it in the past.
Is Colombia doing any of that as well?
I think that it has. We did it for a while, and we are looking at ways that we're in certain areas that we can start up additional programs. But I think it depends on specific locations.
Right. And I'll finish up with this. The FARC is known to have deep ties with Hezbollah, other transnational criminal organizations. This committee, well aware, knows very fully my interest in the Iranian threat in this hemisphere and the Iranian activity in this hemisphere, either through its proxy Hezbollah or directly. And I'm curious about what impact a peace agreement may have on Hezbollah and Iran's activities in the Western Hemisphere. If you could touch on that.
It's a bit of a hypothetical. I guess I would make the observation is that we remain acutely alert to whatever activities Hezbollah or other groups or Iran in the region. We certainly will call out any activities that we find suspect, but we'll have to see how a peace process would affect those sets of relationships, because I'm not in a position to forecast it.
I would encourage the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs to take a closer look at the Iranian activity, directly or indirectly through its proxies in the Western Hemisphere. I would recommend that the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs talk with General Kelly at Southcom. I would recommend that the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs be very aware of what's here. And with that, I'll turn to the ranking member, Ms. Sears.